Hello, everyone. Good morning. All right. So we started with the concepts of array in the last session. Let me have a quick recap of all those, what we have studied. And then we are moving further with the program where we can understand like how we can define an array, pass the values, retrieve the values, and print them on the screen. So let me first of all start with what exactly it is an array. See, I told you that if we define a variable, the capacity of one variable is to store one value. The capacity of one variable is to store one value. That could be of any of data type. For example, if you have defined one integer variable, for example, integer num equals to 24. Now this num is what? It's a variable. What is the data type of this variable? It's an integer. And what is 24? 24 is the value. Can I store two different values in the same variable? If I would store 24, it presently contains 24. If I would replace this 24 with 37, that 24 get overwritten by 37. It is not possible that 24 and 37, both of them are going to reside inside the same variable. No. The capacity of one variable is to store only one value of a particular data type. Similarly, if you have defined, for example, a string variable with a name called customer name, it can store only one value of string. You cannot store two of them. You define a variable ID, it can store one ID. You define a variable date, it can store one date. So basically, the capacity of a variable is to store only one value of a particular data type. Now, for example, if I wanted to store 100 integers, 1000 strings, 10,000 IDs, do I suppose to write down, or maybe do I suppose to create all that much of variables? If I wanted to, let's say, store 10,000 integer values, should I create 10,000 integer variables for that? The answer to this is no, absolutely not. You have to define something called as an arrays. So arrays are what? Arrays are collection of similar data types. Array give you this functionality in program that you could store multiple values inside in just one name. With one name, you could store multiple values, but that should be of the same data type. That is what is a limitation with the arrays. Arrays is a collection of homogeneous values. When we say homogeneous, we are referring to all those values which have the same kind of attribute, which all of them have same data type, particularly in this case. So that is what is an array, and that's what's an benefit. We also have studied in the last session how to define an array. The first thing in definition is the data type. You have to specifically mention that this array is going to store all this kind of values. For example, if I have defined an array with an integer or maybe of the string, it represents that all of those values which are going to be stored inside this array would be of the data type integer, would be of the data type string, would be of the data type ID. So while we are defining an array, the first thing itself is to define the data type. The first thing itself is to define the data type and followed by a symbol. The symbol is opening and a closing square bracket, which should ideally be empty. At this moment, it should be empty. You have to give the size, but that size should be given after new keyword. After new keyword. Let's talk about this. So this is what a definition. This is what, like how we can create the whole thing, not just this one. And then you have to give something an array name that's customized. After equals to, you have to specifically mention a new keyword. New keyword is to reserve the memory. Now new should know how much amount of memory I should reserve. For example, here I have defined integer 10. That means this array with a name called customer code is going to store 10 integer values. Now you decide how much amount of memory is going to be get reserved for these 10 integers. I don't know. It's up to you because you are compiler. I am not compiler. I'm a user. Let's consider for every integer if it would require like 4 bytes of memory. So how many of them would be required for 10? 4 multiplied by 10 would give 40 bytes. So it's up to the new keyword to reserve 40 bytes of memory. And this is something called as static memory allocations. The memory itself is defined in the beginning, and there are two ways to do that. I'm going to show you that. This is one way, there is one more another way. There's one another way to do that. I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you that as well. But the size of array should be defined in the beginning itself. In the beginning itself, while you are defining an array, while you are declaring an array, at that moment itself, you have to mention the size of the array. You cannot keep it blank at here. If you would try to do this, compiler won't accept it, and it's going to throw you an error. I must know the size of this. I must know the size. I cannot allow you to define an array without mentioning the size. No. You must tell me how much amount of memory is going to be get reserved for this array. Or this is something called a static memory allocation. So, right. All right. So let me take a small program for this so that I could show you like how we can define an array and do some certain more operations with that. So I have migrated to developer console, and now let me take you to the sync apex. Oh, what I'm saying. We are going to execute anonymous window. Oh, over here, I'm going to do the program. So I would first of all would define an array, and let me show you how to define that, the one which we were discussing right now. So let's consider that I would be defining an array to store, let's say 5 or 10 integer variables. So the first thing is to mention the data type, integer, and then this symbol. This symbol indicates that this is an array, integer array. Let's give any name. For example, customer. अरे यार क्या हो रहा है आज? Customer and then code. All right. This is the name of the array, and then new keyword. Again, you have to mention, like, see, if I would keep it blank and now if I would try to save it, sorry, no, he cannot save it over here. Now, if I would try to execute, see, it would give me an error called as unexpected token. Here it is unexpected token. What is going to be happening in upcoming days? We are going to program something over here in the developer console. Now we are taking advantage of this execute anonymous window, which actually is a temporary window. And you can although execute your program from here, but you cannot save it because there's nothing to save, right? That is what is limitation with this. But in upcoming days, after maybe once you have started with the object-oriented, I'm going to start with the object-oriented programmings. So there we are going to learn how we can create the classes and all that. So that time we are going to program it over here in the developer console itself. We are not going to write the code in the execute anonymous window. Rather, execute anonymous window would be used only for the execution purpose. This we are going to use. I'm not saying we are going to dump it out. No, we are going to use execute anonymous window, but that would be only for the execution purpose. We are going to actually create the program over here in the upcoming days. All right. So right now it's showing you this error, unexpected token. But when you do this inside over here, it would give you a certain different error. I mean, error with a different message. But anyways, whatever the message it is, more importantly, I cannot define an array without giving a size. So size is something which is essential. Size is something which is essential. At the time of defining of an array itself, when you are declaring an array, at that moment itself, you have to mention the size. If you won't give it, compiler would throw an error to you. All right. See, I have defined this, integer. That means with the new keyword, and the amount of memory, certain amount of memory is being reserved. Actually, five different, whatever the amount of memory is being required for storing the 5 integer variable, that much amount of memory is being reserved. Now, what this memory contains typically? In case of C programming and C++, not little unsure about C++, but for the C programming, whenever you define a memory that contains some garbage value, what does this mean by the garbage value? Whatever was the data inside the memory contains whatever. See, the memory is never blank. Try to understand this. Memory is never, it always contains something. How comes? If I would take you very deep into this, that's a topic. I mean, when we are saying memory, The memories are ultimately made up of, I mean, if you, I don't know you know this or not. Maybe you don't know this, but just for your general knowledge, just for your general knowledge, the memories are, something that is usually made up of, the deepest component of this is flip-flop. We used to say this as F oblique F, flip-flop, flip-flop. Now these flip-flops, they are internally made up of logic gates. Those who are computer engineers, those who are electronics engineer, electrical engineer, maybe they know that. Logic gates. Logic gates, logic gates are made up of transistors, by the way. Transistors are made up of the semiconductors. All right. Transistors are made up of the semiconductors. So this is the whole series. But understand one thing. Understand one thing. This is not a topic. We are not discussing any engineering thing. All right. These are not something what we have to study. More importantly, you should understand that memory is never blank. But when you define new integer 5, this has reserved a certain amount of memory that is capable to store 5 integers. Now, what this memory typically contains at this moment, because I haven't supplied any value yet. All right. I just have defined a memory. I just have reserved a memory for storing 5 different integer values. Now, what those memory would contain right now? If you wanted to see that, we can definitely see that as well. So if I wanted to print the values, if I wanted to print the values of array, right, inside of array. So I can simply use system.debug at this moment. I can simply use system.debug. And I could print that array. आज typing नहीं हो रही भाई. Array elements are equals to plus, just give the name of the array. What is the name of the array? Customer code. So I'll just copy and paste it out over here. And now when I would execute this, you're going to see what this all 5 memory location would contains. What do you see? Null. So in Apex programming, the memory doesn't contains garbage value. The memory doesn't contain the garbage value. Now, why I was discussing this, understand one thing. In the C programming, whenever you define a memory, and for example, you are using it, I mean, why this was important? Why this was important. Let's consider if I have defined a variable, integer num, all right, and I have not given the value. Why I'm discussing that? System.debug num equals to plus num. All right, let's see what is going to be the output for this. So in Apex programming, this variable or the memory, whatever you have defined, memory defined it for the arrays, memory defined for the array. For the variable, it would contain null. But in C programming, what happens is like, it contains certain values. It contains certain values. Let's say it contains 24, just for an example. Because previously the memory would hold the previous data, and let's say the previous data was 24. So your variable would automatically be assigned as 24. Now, for example, if you are performing certain operation, that you are performing something like, let's say that we have a variable called as result equals to num plus 10. Ideally, what you are expecting, I just have defined a memory. It doesn't contains anything. So this is 0. 0 plus 10 would give me 10. But it would contain like 24 plus 10 would give you 34. So it was like programmers' intelligence to clear that memory. So in C programming, whenever we wanted a variable to become, to contain 0, what we have, we initially do it like this. At the time of defining this variable, we itself give it the value, we declare it. This was definition, this was declaration. When you give a value, it's declaration. When you don't give a value, it's definition. Just these two terms, and we can use it. हम तो use को दोनों use कर सकते हैं, because when we are defining a variable, usually कैसा होता था C programming में, when you just define a variable without a value, that was a definition. When you give the value, we call this as a declaration. लेकिन अभी मैं declaration भी बोलता हूँ, अभी मैं definition भी बोलता हूँ कभी कभी. जैसे मैंने बोला कि I have defined a variable, I have defined a array, I have declared array. Why I say this? Because maybe I just have defined that. मैंने values नहीं दिया अभी, but compiler has taken care of that and it has stored all null into that. So it has internally, the values has been assigned. All of those memory have null. So now if the values are there, I could even say this is the declaration. तो यहाँ पे डिफाइन करना, डिक्लेयर करना, ये दो अलग अलग टर्मिनोलॉजीज नहीं है। लेकिन जो प्रोसीजर ओरिएंटेड लैंग्वेजेस हुआ करती थी, सी प्रोग्रामिंग, सी प्लस प्लस प्रोग्रामिंग, C++, although was like 50% of that code was object oriented, the 30 to 40% was procedure oriented. So they were highly, they were highly, what to say? I'm not getting the proper word for that. But there you actually have to mind your words, what you are saying, whether it's a definition, whether it's a declaration, right? यहाँ पे ऐसा इतना tension नहीं होता है ना. You don't have that much tension over here. So this is why you don't have to worry about like what this memory would contain. You just define this. The compiler would take care of this, and it would store all nulls into how much memory you have been reserved. All of every memory location of them would contain null value. ठीक है? चलो. So now let's let's assign the value. Let's assign the value to, or let's insert the elements. I mean, this you could say as insert the elements to array. Now, see, at this moment, I wanted you to understand one thing before, I mean, I would go further with this. You have defined an array. You have defined an array with the size as 5, right? With the size as 5. Or let me draw this like this. Not this one. I shall draw it like this. Like this. So this array has reserved a certain amount of memory. How much? Whatever the portion of memory would require to store 5 integers, right? Whatever the portion of the memory would require to store 5 integers. Without mouse, it's really difficult. So that much portion, that much portion of memory is being reserved. All right. So let's consider this is that memory what we have reserved. This is that memory what we have reserved. Now, whenever we define an array, right? Whenever we define an array, every array position, or maybe every array location, see, understand, this is one location, this is another location, this is another location, and all of them are what? All of them are locations. All of them are locations. So every array location by default is being numbered with something called as array index. So if you have given the name, if you have given the name to this array as customer code, so this becomes customer, or I cannot accommodate the whole thing. Let's take that the array name is A only. ऐसा मान के चलो थोड़ी देर के लिए. So this position would be referred as A of 0. This position would be referred as A of 0. What is the index? 0th index. This position would be referred as array of 1. All right. What is the index? First 1. This position would be referred as A of 2. This one would be referred as A of 3. And this one would be referred as A of 4. This one would be referred as A of 4. So array indexes are, first of all, what is an array index? So array index is a name given to every location of the array. Given to every location, every memory location inside the array has a name. What is that name? It's an index. And remember, the index position always starts with 0. It never starts with 1. Why it's always starts with 0? Because that is a rule of technology. That's how the compiler would interpret this. That's a rule of compiler. Whenever it would define an array, it would reserve a certain amount of memory. Inside the heap memory, there's a memory called as heap, H-E-A-P, heap. So it would give a name, it would give array indexes, and it would always give it from 0. That's how the compiler programming is being there. Compiler is programmed accordingly, so it would always give it the array index from the 0. Now, if you would store something inside the array, or you wanted to store something inside the array, okay, you have to follow the same pattern. Let me try to show you that. So I wanted to assign, the values. To this array. So I have to use something called as array index. See, this is the name of array. Like if consider A is the name of array. So what is going to be the first location address? The address of first location becomes A of 0. Similarly, the array name is customer code. So what is going to be the address of first location? It would become customer code of 0. This is all right. Equals to. Now you can give the value. Here you have to give only integer values. Only integers. Why? Because it's an integer array, right? It's an integer array. Give any value. For example, 4,000. All right. Let me copy this. Paste it. So this is my customer code of 0. The next become customer code of 1. Customer code of 1. All right. I'll give some another value to this. Let's say 3,000. And then this becomes my code of 2. All right. And let me give the value as maybe 8,000. All right. So this way you have to give the values. And similarly, with this way only you have to retrieve it. I'm going to show you that as well. Okay, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, and then 3, and then 3. And let me give the value as maybe 7800, something like that. And the final value would be customer code of 4th. Now 4th would actually it is 5, 5th location, and that much value you have it over here. So accordingly, accordingly you would have to supply the values. So this is what does it means by the array index. So what are the array index? These are the addresses of every location of the array. Now, after assigning the value, if I wanted to print it, let me go with this statement once again. I have printed it before as well, but now after assigning the value, if I wanted to print it, let's see what happens. See, before it was null. Now, after assigning the values, it contains whatever we have supplied to them, right? Whatever we have supplied to them. Fine. All right. हाँ चलो अब एक तो अच्छा यहाँ पे एक चीज if you have observed, I mean if you have observed, it's coming in the one it's coming in a single line. I mean all of the values they are coming in a single line, like 4,000 comma 3,000 and all that, right? Now see how many values could we get printed from, how many values could be printed over here? The answer is from this location to this, that much. How much values could be accommodated from this much to this are going to be get printed? What about the other? I'm not sure how many values could be accommodated. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if this is like 5 values, this is 5, 5 2s are 10, 5 3s are 15, 4, 20. I think 20 to 25 values could be accommodated over here, not more than that. But if my array would contains 100 value, 1,000 value, 10,000 value, and I wanted to print them, are all of them going to accommodate it into this place? The answer is no. Last value के बाद में यहाँ से dot 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 आ जाएगा, and you won't be able to see the every values. तो इसको हम कैसे फिर how we can print it in the next line like 4,000, उसके बाद में next line में 3,000, उसके बाद में next line में 8,000, and then यहाँ पे ऐसा and this value. So how we could print him, in every, how we could print every value in the next line? So that is where we are going to make a use of loops. All right, let's see that. Let's see that. Let's see that as well. So, and let me put up a separator over here, system.debug, just a separator, few lines, nothing else. So if I wanted to, let's say, if I wanted to print the elements of array into next line, if I wanted to print the elements of array into next line, how can I do that? How? And this is obviously, see, understand why I'm making you learn of this. Suppose if you wanted to print, I mean, if you are printing it like this, if you are printing the values like this, right? If you are printing the values, before that, let me show you something more. उसके पहले, मतलब एक तरीका क्या है? I mean, if you wanted to print into, so what is one, let's say system.debug, ठीक है? System.debug element of, let's say, array equals to, this is one way. All right, this is one way. This is one way. Let me show you that. This is one way. 1, 2, 3, and 3 and 4. Right. All right. This is one way. Let me show you something. फिर हम इसके drawbacks पे बात करते हैं, and then we're going to talk something else. So what I did is like, I have given how many system.debug? 5 system.debug statements. Print, every system.debug would going to print every one element, all right? Every one element. Let's see. So if I would execute this, now if I go back and I'll see how the output is coming up. So now it's coming like this. Every value is coming in the next line. That's good. That's good. Instead of printing them adjacently one after another, we are able to print it in the next line, every value in the next line. So that's good. But then what is the drawback with this? Okay, there were only 5 values, so I could use 5 different system.debug. What about if there were 50 different values? What about if there were 500 different values inside an array? 5,000 values, 5 lakh values. Are we supposed to write it like this? Obviously no. Obviously no. It's whenever you are doing it, whenever you are doing your increasing number of lines of the code. If there are 5,000 values you wanted to print, and if you are printing it like this, it means you are taking 5,000 lines for that. So this is not the way. This is not the way to implement, right? We must have some another way. Yes, of course, that's the place where we have learned something called as your iterative statements, loops. So I would be making a use of for loop over here. Let me show you something. I would be making a use of for loop. How many values I wanted to print? I wanted to print like 5 values. So I would define a counter with 0, and counter is less than or maybe equals to 4. 0 to 4 is 5. 0 to 9 is 10. 0 to 99 is 100, by the way. I hope you know this. And then counter plus plus. All right, counter plus plus. So it would first of all would check the value. I have to define this integer counter. Integer counter equals to 0. Counter is less than 4. And then counter plus plus. So the value of counter is 0. If counter is less than 4, which is true because 0 is less than 4, all right, it would come inside the loop. It would come inside the loop. Here I would print system.debug the element, and I could even print the position. If element at the position. All right, I'll keep it simple first of all, then मैं यहाँ पे modification करता हूँ. The element of array equals to plus what is the name of array? The name of array is customer code with the index position of counter, COUNTR, counter. So whatever the index position of counter, like counter presently is 0. Counter presently is 0, है ना? So it would assign as 0. It would assign as 0. And then ठीक है, चलो पहले इतना आउटपुट देख लो, उसके बाद में फिर मैं और इस पे बात करता हूँ. Same like you have used 5 different system.debug, उसका आउटपुट देखो और इसका आउटपुट देखो, दोनों सेम है ना? अब इसको हम समझ लेते हैं. यहाँ पे what you did is like, you have, because you wanted to print 5 elements, you have used 5 different system.debugs, right? For these 5 different elements on array, you have used 5 different system. If there were 50, if you would use this technique, you are going to use 50 system.debug. If there were maybe like 5,000 array elements, you are going to print like, you are going to use 5,000 system.debug. So try to understand कि ये सही नहीं है. The same thing I have implemented just with 3 lines of code. Even though ये दोनों भी जरूरी नहीं. If you have just one statement, right? If you just have one statement, you can directly give it like this. No. Sorry. This works for if statement. For के लिए लगेगा ये आपको. For के लिए लगेगा. So just by 3 statements you can, and what by 3 आप इसको यहाँ पे concatenate भी कर सकते हो, and you can even concatenate, ऐसा भी कर सकते हो. This would also work. If I wanted to optimize, I can even optimize this like this. See, this would also work, right? It would give you the same output. वो तो रीडेबिलिटी के लिए मैंने ऐसा बताया, अदरवाइज you can even concatenate it, you can optimize this like this as well, all right, बट हो सकता है आपको रीडेबल ना लगे, थोड़ा सा डिफिकल्ट लगे, इसलिए आई विल कीप इट सिंपल। तो हम इसको इस तरह से दिखाते हैं, बट हालांकि आप इसको एक ही लाइन में ला सकते हो, ठीक है। व्हेन यू वांटेड टू ऑप्टिमाइज द कोड, तो आप इस तरह से भी कर सकते हैं इसको, एनीवेज। चलो, तो दिस होल, फॉर एग्जांपल देयर वर 500 लाइंस, ऐसा मान के चलो देयर वर 500 स्टेटमेंट्स। तो आई वुड जस्ट रिक्वायर टू रन दिस, आई वुड जस्ट रिक्वायर टू रन दिस फ्रॉम 0 to 499 or from 1 to 500, that would also work. So what I wanted you to understand is, this is what is an advantage with loops, all right. Let me make it more readable. अभी कैसे मैं प्रिंट कर रहा हूँ, the elements of the array, the elements of the array is 4000, I can even modify this little bit, the element on the position, all right, on the position plus, let's give the value of counter on the position, let's give a value, and the position counter on the index, plus I wanted to use a string closing bracket, one space equals to one space over here, plus, now see, you are going to understand, don't worry, इसलिए मैंने पहले नहीं बताया, अभी बता रहा हूँ। Customer code plus the value of counter. Plus use as a concatenation operator. Always remember this. ठीक है. Let's now execute this. See how does the output looks like to be. The element on the index 0, on the index 1, index 2, 3, 4. Now these 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, these values are coming from where? These are coming from the counter variable, what you have defined over here. ये जो counter variable आपने define किया, उसको मैंने concatenate किया, बस और कुछ नहीं, ठीक है। And see, wherever you wanted to combine the strings, you have to make a use of plus operator over here. तो मैंने इतना लिखने के बाद में I have closed this string, ये string को मैंने close कर दिया। उसके बाद मैंने प्लस ऑपरेटर का यूज किया, तो प्लस क्या करता है, कॉन्कैटिनेशन करता है। यहाँ पे मैंने कॉन्कैटिनेट किया वैल्यू, मैंने उसको कॉन्कैटिनेट का हिंदी में जो कुछ भी होता होगा, सो मतलब टू मेक समथिंग टू बी पुट ऑन एडजेसेंट, बाय द वे, सो वट एवर इज द मीनिंग इन हिंदी, सो उसको मैंने यहाँ पे लेके आया। तो वैल्यू कौन सी लाया मैंने, वट एवर द वैल्यू ऑफ काउंटर प्रेजेंट लेटेस्ट, तो फॉर द फर्स्ट इट इज 0, सो यहाँ पे 0 आ गया। उसके बाद में आई वॉन्टेड टू कॉन्कैटिनेट समथिंग मोर, सो दैट्स वाई मैंने अगेन फिर से प्लस सिंबल यूज किया, बिकॉज नाउ उसके बाद जो भी था सिंबल था दैट वाज अ स्ट्रिंग, तो स्ट्रिंग्स आर ऑलवेज गिवन इन अ सिंगल कोड, डू यू नो दिस, राइट। उसके बाद फिर आई हैव आस्क्ड फॉर वन स्पेस ओवर हियर, एक स्पेस यहाँ पे, एंड नेक्स्ट टू दिस आई हैव प्रिंटेड द वैल्यू, राइट। तो यहाँ पे अभी द आउटपुट लुक्स लाइक टू बी दिस, and it look good, right? The element in the index position 0 is this, on the first it is this, all right? So this is what is in advantage of using loop. चलो, अब ये हो गया। अब एक बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट डिस्कशन, ठीक है, अब एक बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट डिस्कशन, वी कैन नॉट सेव इट ओवर हियर। See, there, I mean, if you are using this for loop, so यहाँ जो मैंने for loop लगाया, इसकी बाउंड्रीज क्या है, up to, I mean, how many times this is getting iterate? So this is being iterated for 5 times, 0 to 4. 0 to 4 is what? It's a 5. So because I know one thing, that that my array is of size 5. Array is of size 5. ठीक है, array is of size 5. So because in the case of array, you know the size. In the case of an array, you know the size. ठीक है, in the case of an array, you know the size. Now see, array could also be defined like this. Let me try to show you something. Arrays could also be defined like this. The another way of defining arrays are this one. See, arrays could also be defined like this. अभी थोड़ा सा ध्यान से सुनो सभी लोग. String array, data type, and then array. String array, the name of array is country names. New string. Now this, see, over here is blank. But I have told you whenever you are defining an array, you must have to give the size. Without giving the size, it would going to give you the error जो हमने देखा, illegal symbol, unknown symbol, whatever. But यहाँ पे I'm keeping it blank. But immediately next to this, we have opened a curly bracket and a closed a curly bracket. Inside curly bracket, we have given the values. We although haven't mentioned, we although have not mentioned that what is the values, I mean, what is the size? No, we haven't mentioned what is the size, but then we have given the values directly. So this is also one another way to define an array. Now, in this case, what compiler would do, it would going to calculate this. What is the count of how many values? How many values are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So because there were 7 string values, it would automatically, when it would compile this, it would give a value as 7. Although we are not mentioning, but it has given a value. It has internally converted that, it has counted how many values are there, and accordingly it has given a size. So giving a size is very essential. So this is one of the case. See, this is one of the case. Now listen this very carefully. Where size is not mentioned. Although size is supplied by giving the values, and that has to be calculated from the compiler. We are not calculating. This is a case where size is not given. Where size is not given. All right. First. Now, second, I have told you in the last lecture, I have told you that collections are of two types. Collections are of two types. Those who are having all similar values, all homogeneous values, similar values, they are always stored inside an array, right? And those who have similar plus dissimilar, homogeneous plus heterogeneous, they are stored inside something called as collection. They are stored inside something called as collections. They are stored inside something called as collection. Collection, there are three types. We are going to learn them. List collection, set collection, map collection. अच्छा, एक चीज और बहुत जो इंपॉर्टेंट है इस बारे में, array follows, array have something called as static memory allocations, right? Arrays have something called as a static memory allocation. Arrays have something called as a static memory allocation, whereas your collection have something called as dynamic memory allocation. So in case of an array, the memory is always assigned in the beginning. How much elements are to be stored inside the array, that is known to compiler in the beginning itself, in the declaration, the definition itself. But for the collection, it is not known. For the collection, it is not known. अच्छा, अभी यहाँ पर एक बात जो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है वो ये है, देखो, if you know the size, that how many elements are being inside the array, you can apply this loop. Why? Because you know how many elements. If, for example, this array contains 5, तो I could run this from 0 to 5 as well, 0 to 4 as well, from 1 to 5. लेकिन अगर 1 लूंगा मैं तो यहाँ पे थोड़ा सा दिक्कत जाएगी, है ना, इस वजह से ऐसा नहीं लेता हूँ मैं. लेट्स कंसीडर 0 to 4. 0 to 4 is always 5. अगर यहाँ पे if there are 500 elements, I'll take it 0 to 499. If there are 10,000 elements, accordingly मैं उस हिसाब से count अपना adjust कर लूंगा. 10,000 minus 1 would give you 9,999, मेरी last value. But from 0 to 999 would give you the 10,000 only. ठीक है, वो तो मैथमेटिकल बात है, वो समझ में आती है. लेकिन इंपॉर्टेंट यहाँ पे जो समझना है वो ये है कि if you know the count, if you know how many elements are there inside the array, if you know how many elements are inside the collection, if we know how many elements are inside the collection, if we know how many elements are inside the collection, if you know the size, then you can use this loop. What about if you don't know it? चलो, What about if you don't know? अभी अरे के केस में ऐसा नहीं होता, रेयरली ऐसा नहीं हो सकता ना. आपको तो अरे, मैंने पहले ही बोल दिया कि अरे में साइज इंपॉर्टेंट है. अगर आप ऐसे नहीं देते हो, बाय द वे, इफ यू आर नॉट डिफाइनिंग इट अरे लाइक दिस, एंड इवन दो इफ यू आर डिफाइनिंग इट लाइक दिस, चलो ठीक है ना, वी कैन काउंट दिस एलिमेंट, पता कर सकते हैं, वो भी पता कर सकते हैं. 10, 5, 15, 20 है तो ठीक है. अगर 500 एलिमेंट है सिर्फ वैल्यूज दी हुई हैं 500, तो क्या फिर हमें सारी वैल्यूज को एक एक करके गिनना चाहिए? सोचो, जरा सा सोचो, आप तकलीफें देखो। मान के चलो एक अरे डिफाइन हुआ है उसमें, और वो डिफाइन इस तरह से हुआ है कि न्यू के साथ में यहाँ पे साइज ना देते हुए वैल्यूज दे दी गई हैं। ठीक है, अब कंपाइलर को तो पता चल जाता है, बट मुझे एक लूप लगाना है इस अरे पे। कंट्री नेम्स नाम का एक अरे है जिसपे मुझे लूप लगाना है। आई नीड टू स्कैन एवरी वैल्यू आउट ऑफ दिस अरे। तो मुझे स्टार्ट करना है फर्स्ट वैल्यू से, और मुझे एंड तक जाना है। आई हैव टू ट्रेवर्स टिल द लास्ट वैल्यू। तो वी आर ट्रेवर्सिंग फ्रॉम फर्स्ट वैल्यू टू द लास्ट वैल्यू। We are scanning from the first value to the last value. First value I know it would be on the present, it would be on the index 0, 0th index पे रहेगी. What about the last value? उसका इंडेक्स कैसे पता चलेगा? हाँ, तो अभी चलो, यहाँ तो वैल्यूज मेंशन नहीं है। जैसे इस प्रोग्राम में वैल्यूज मेंशन थी। आई नो कि भाई ये अरे जो है ये 5 एलिमेंट स्टोर कर रहा है। तो फर्स्ट एलिमेंट वुड ऑलवेज बी ऑन द 0th इंडेक्स। तो आई हैव स्टार्टेड माई काउंटर फ्रॉम 0, and the last value would be like, ये जो भी size है, size -1 would always give you the last index address. तो 5 - 1 would give me the 4, that is going to be 4. ठीक है, पता चल गया। अगर बाय द वे प्रोग्रामिंग सिचुएशन ऐसा कोई अरे डिफाइन हुआ है, इसमें एलिमेंट्स दिए हुए हैं, तुमको अब इसको इसको इटरेट करने का है। अब तुम्हें साइज पता करना जरूरी है। इफ यू वांटेड टू ट्रेवर्स एवरी वैल्यू आउट ऑफ दिस अरे, you should know what is the last value. I mean, what is the count of the last value? अभी 4 5 10 ठीक है ना। अगर उसमें 5,000 वैल्यूज है, तो आर यू रियली गोइंग टू काउंट ऑल ऑफ देम जस्ट टू नो? जस्ट टू नो, है ना? तो ये पॉसिबल नहीं है। तो इसमें दो तरीके हैं फिर। चलिए, एक तो मैं सिखाता हूँ आपको। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, इफ आई डोंट नो द साइज ऑफ द अरे, I don't know the size because there, I mean, at the time of declaring an array, size was not given, rather the values has been given. So based on the value, compiler तो पता चल जाएगा कंपाइलर को। मुझे कैसे पता चलेगा? आर आम इफ डिड आई एम सपोज टू काउंट एवरी वैल्यू आउट ऑफ दिस? नो, वो भी जरूरत नहीं है। ठीक है, उसके लिए एक तरीका है। आई कैन शो यू लाइक समवेयर अराउंड ओवर हियर। इफ यू वांटेड टू प्रिंट द साइज ऑफ द अरे, प्रिंट द साइज ऑफ द अरे। अरे का साइज अगर आपको प्रिंट करने का है, अरे का साइज इफ यू वांटेड टू प्रिंट, तो सिस्टम डॉट डीबग, there is a particular method for that. The array size, the array size equals to, ठीक है, equals to plus, what is the name of array? Customer code. Customer code, there's a method called as size method. Customer code size dot size. And see, methods क्या होती हैं, you're going to learn that. ठीक है, but for now जैसे system dot debug is a method, by the way. Every method always have this opening and a closing round bracket. System dot debug also have it. So wherever you see this, wherever you see this opening and a closing round bracket, that is a method. That is a method. You will going to learn this as well. Methods are of two type: procedures and functions. You will going to learn everything. Don't worry. Gradually, we would learn everything. अभी तो आपको कैच करते चलने का है। So there's a way to do that as well, right? There's a way to do that as well. So there's a method by which I could print the values. I could print the size of the array as well. Now let's see what happens when I would execute this. The array size is 5. So for example, if you don't know the size of array, at the time of defining the array, the size was not given, rather the values were being given. And there were so many values. So to know the size, we will not count every values. Rather, what we do, we would just make a use of this method. There's a method called a size method. And it works for every collection. This doesn't just work for the array. अभी आपको मैं list collection, set collection और map collection पढ़ाने वाला हूँ, ठीक है? कलेक्शन के तौर पे वैसे आप चार चीजें पढ़ने वाले हो: अरेज, विच इज अ कलेक्शन ऑफ सिमिलर एलिमेंट्स। उसके बाद आएंगे लिस्ट, सेट और मैप। दे आर ऑल्सो कलेक्शन, बट दे आर कलेक्शन ईदर ऑफ सिमिलर और डिसिमिलर, दोनों हो सकते हैं। होमोजीनियस भी हो सकता है, हेट्रोजीनियस भी हो सकता है, कॉम्बिनेशन ऑफ होमो प्लस हेट्रो भी हो सकता है। चलो, वो एक अलग बात है। बट दिस मेथड साइज वर्क्स एवरीवेयर। इट एक्चुअली वर्क्स ऑन कलेक्शन। इसका ना तो अरे से कोई लेना देना है, ना लिस्ट से, ना सेट से, ना मैप से। इट वर्क्स ऑन कलेक्शन। इट वर्क्स ऑन कलेक्शन। तो साइज मेथड वुड ऑलवेज गिव number of the count of number of elements inside a collection. What does the side method would always return? It returns an integer value. It always returns an integer value. and that integer represent the count of number of elements inside your collection. That collection could be an array, could be a list, could be set, could be map. वो चाहे कुछ भी हो. Size method always give you back an integer value, and that integer represents the count of number of elements inside the particular collection. So चलो अगर हमें साइज नहीं पता था और हमें लूप लगाना था, ठीक है, हमें लूप लगाना था. अब लूप लगाने के लिए मुझे पहली वैल्यू तो पता है कि पहली वैल्यू 0 पर है, आखिरी वैल्यू उसका इंडेक्स आना जरूरी है, वरना मैं इसको लूप को बाउंड्री कैसे दूंगा. तो मुझे नहीं पता था. तो एक तरीका तो ये है कि यू कैन फार दिस सिस्टम डॉट डीबग में आप साइज मेथड ले सकते हो और इससे आपको पता चल जाएगा. दिस इज वन वे, बट देन देर इज वन मोर वे टू डू दैट. और अब जो सिखाने जा रहा हूं वो सबसे सही तरीका होता है और 90% ऑफ द प्रोग्राम में यही यूज होता है. तो आप बहुत ध्यान से देखेंगे आप, ठीक है. इसलिए मैं इतनी लंबी कहानी जो बनाया है ना, देखो उसका रीजन यही है, तुमको वो डिफिकल्टी बताना. उसका सोल्यूशन भी है मेरे पास में, वो भी तुमको दिखाया. ऐसा नहीं है कि तुमको साइज पता करने का तरीका नहीं है, वो भी है अपने पास. लेकिन फिर ये एक तरह से ओवरहेड ही तो है. पहले आप सिस्टम डॉट डिबग या फिर या सॉरी पहले आप डॉट साइज मेथड यूज लो करोगे, उससे पहले आप साइज पता करोगे. फिर साइज पता करने के बाद फिर कहीं जाके आप ये लूप लगा पाओगे. मतलब ये दिस यू वुड डू इट ओवर हियर फॉर एग्जांपल, है ना. आप पहले साइज पता करोगे अरे का विद दिस मेथड, उसके बाद में जब आपको साइज पता चल जाता है तब जाके आप अपना लूप लगाओगे. तो ये तो एक तरह से ओवर रेडी हुआ, है ना. इसका एक दूसरा तरीका है, इसका एक दूसरा तरीका है, दैट 8:26 हो गए. तो इसका दूसरा तरीका वो है एनहांस्ड फॉर लूप. ठीक है, जस्ट गिव मी 2 मिनट्स. मैं नेक्स्ट क्लास को 5 मिनट और सामने करता हूँ. 5 मिनट हो पाएगा, हो पाएगा, हो पाएगा. 1 मिनट ना, बस मैसेज डालने दो मुझको. ये आज ही खत्म करना है हमको. ओके चलो. सो इसका एक दूसरा तरीका है. सो वेन एवर यू डोंट नो द साइज ऑफ एनी कलेक्शन, जब भी आपको किसी कलेक्शन का साइज पता ना हो, कलेक्शन से मेरा मतलब सब कुछ है, अरे, लिस्ट, सेट, मैप. Whenever you don't know the size of any collection and you wanted to print the elements, you wanted to print the elements, या फिर आप जो कुछ भी करना चाहते हो और simple you just wanted to use the elements, then we make a use of something called as enhanced for loop. enhanced for loop. I hope आप ये पूरा ट्रैक कर पा रहे हो सीरीज कि हम क्या पढ़ रहे हैं. We are learning something called as iterative loop, iterative statements. ठीक है, मैंने आपको while पढ़ाया, do while पढ़ाया, for भी पढ़ा दिया अभी. अब मैं आपको लेके जा रहा हूँ एनहांस पे, लेकिन एनहांस फॉर लूप लगाने के लिए हमको कलेक्शन चाहिए. एनहांस फॉर लूप कहीं और नहीं लग सकता, कलेक्शन पे लगता है. इसीलिए मैंने कलेक्शन के तौर पे अभी अरे पढ़ाया आपको. अरे इसको कैसे हम नॉर्मल फॉर लूप से प्रिंट कर सकते हैं वो भी बताया. अगर वैल्यू पता है तो बहुत अच्छी बात है. काउंटर वैल्यूज, आई मीन कितनी 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 वैल्यूज हैं, कितने एलिमेंट्स हैं अरे के अंदर, अगर साइज पता है तो. अगर साइज नहीं पता है तो साइज कैसे पता करना, उसके हिसाब से लूप लगाना, वो भी बताया. अब मैं आपको बताने जा रहा हूँ एनहांस फॉर लूप. तो आपको कोई जरूरत नहीं होती साइज वगैरह देखने की. योर एम इज टू इटरेट all of the element inside the array. That means from the first element till the last element. If you wanted to traverse from the first element to the last element, then you can simply make a use of enhance for loop. And remember, I'm telling you this, for 90% of the cases, whenever we are dealing with collections in the real time programming, whenever we are dealing with collections, collection could be array, could be list, set, map. पढ़ने वाले हो आप अभी. 90% of the cases we always use enhanced for loop. We never use conventional for loop. Conventional for loop is used only in the few programming cases. With you will going to distinguish that. कब करते हैं सर, कब नहीं करते हैं? Don't ask me this question. You will yourself would going to realize this. As and when you grow in the programming, you yourself would going to realize कि in this particular situation I have to use normal for loop, the conventional for loop. But for this particular case I have to go with the enhanced for loop. All right. So you would yourself would be able to define this. Don't worry. As and when you grow, when you become a little more experienced in the programming, you would be able to take this decision. थोड़ा समय लगता है इन चीजों के लिए आने में, है ना, बट आ जाएगा, डोंट वरी. चलो, हाउ डज द फॉर लूप लुक्स लाइक टू बी? सी, फॉर for. In this for loop, there were three sections. First is variable declaration. Second is condition checking. The third was increment and decrement part. There were three sections into this. This is first section, right? This is first section. This one is the second section. This one is the third section. So in a normal for loop, in a conventional for loop, there are three different sections. First section is to define the variables. Second section is to perform the condition checking, and third section was to see for the increment and decrement part, right? This is the conventional for loop. Now in the enhanced for loop, there is only two sections. They are separated by colon. They are separated by colon. All right. अब बहुत ध्यान से सुनो. In the right hand side where the cursor is blinking now, in the right hand side of this colon, where the cursor is blinking right now, you have to give the name of that collection from where you wanted to retrieve the value. You have to give the name of collection over here. You have to give the name of collection over here. Whatever is the name of your collection, from where you wanted to fetch the value, from where you wanted to retrieve the value, you have to give the name. What is the name of my collection? What is the name of my array? Array is customer code. I'll just copy and paste it out over here. Customer code. All right, this is my right hand side. That's it. So every time on the right hand side of this loop, we are going to put name of collection. We are going to put the name of collection. Whatever is the name of my collection. It could be a name of array, name of list, name of set, name of map. But we are going to put it on the right hand side. Now on the left hand side, come into this part. You have to specifically mention two things over here. You have to mention two things. Whatever the value that is coming, see what we are trying to do, we are trying to fetch out every values. We are trying to retrieve every value out of this collection. So in the right hand side, in the left hand side, sorry, right or left का लफड़ा हो गया. In the left hand side, you have to mention two things over here. There are two things. मतलब एक रहेगा x, दूसरा रहेगा समझो y. There would be two things over here. The value of x would be कि यहां से जो इस कलेक्शन से, वो चाहे अरे हो चाहे कुछ भी, जो भी वैल्यू निकल रही है, जो भी निकाल रहे हैं, whatever the value we are accessing, we are fetching, we are retrieving, what is the data type of that? So for this, in this particular case, the customer code is an array of type integer. Every value inside this array is of type integer. So x would always be the data type. Every value inside this collection is of what data type? Now in this case it is integer, तो यहाँ पे मैं क्या लिख रहा हूँ? Integer. अगर ये string होता तो I am going to write string over here. अगर ये ID होता, every value inside this array would be an ID, तो मैं यहाँ ID लिखता. Every value inside this collection would be date, तो मैं यहाँ पे date लिखता. date time लिखता. Binary large object blob, BLOB, तो यहाँ पे blob लिखता. अगर every value inside this would be an object value, जैसे अकाउंट रिकॉर्ड जैसे कुछ, तो मैं यहाँ पे उस ऑब्जेक्ट का नाम लिखता. ये भी आने वाला है सामने में, अकाउंट, कॉन्टैक्ट, ये करेंगे हम यूज, डोंट वरी. So more important is to understand कि whatever inside this collection, whatever every value is, the data type of every values record is, whatever it is, you have to write it down over here. So customer code is an array of data type integer. Every value inside this customer code is of data type integer, and so I have written it as an integer. ठीक है, ये हो गया पहली चीज on the left hand side. Second चीज, y should always be a variable. कोई भी variable name, y should always be a variable name. Even you could keep it y as well. चलता, कुछ भी चलता है, आप कुछ भी नाम दो, जैसे I have given number, कुछ भी ऐसा चलता है ये, ठीक है, that works. This must be what? This must be just a variable. तो ये क्या होता है actually? Now see, this loop with going to iterate. यहाँ पर आपने कुछ भी नहीं दिया. You have not given any size or anything. This is going to be iterated automatically from the first value to the last value. ये first value को लेगा, num में transfer कर देगा. ठीक है, फिर सेकंड वैल्यू को लेगा नम में, ऐसा बारी बारी एक एक वैल्यू को इट इज गोइंग टू गेट ट्रांसफर एवरी वैल्यू इनसाइड नम, इट्स गोइंग टू ट्रांसफर एवरी वैल्यू इनसाइड नम। ठीक है, नाउ आई वुड प्रिंट सिस्टम डॉट डीबग the element of the array. Here you cannot make position. जैसा आपने यहाँ लिखा ना इंडेक्स पोजीशन, यहाँ पे नहीं लिख सकते हो आप, बिकॉज आपने इंडेक्स डिफाइन ही नहीं किया हुआ है और कर भी नहीं सकते। ठीक है, सो आई वुड जस्ट प्रिंट, सी आई वुड जस्ट प्रिंट द वैल्यू ऑफ नम। ये नम की वैल्यू मैं प्रिंट कर रहा हूँ। मेरा पहला वैल्यू जो था वो निकला नम में आ गया। ठीक है, पहला वैल्यू निकला नम में आ गया, आई हैव प्रिंटेड दैट। उसके बाद ये वापस लूप में जाएगा, इट वुड चेक फॉर कि ये लास्ट लास्ट वैल्यू है क्या, पता चला नहीं है तो सेकंड वैल्यू नम में आएगा, आई वुड अगेन प्रिंट दैट 3 4 5 ऐसे लास्ट वैल्यू। तो लास्ट वैल्यू के बाद में क्या होता है कि अब इसको पता कैसे चलता है, तो एक ईओएफ नाम का स्टेटमेंट, एंड ऑफ स्ट्रिंग, एंड ऑफ स्ट्रिंग ईओएस नाम का एक फंक्शन होता है। सो दैट वुड कीप वेन एवर इंटरनली कंपाइलर डिजाइनिंग में, मतलब देर इज समथिंग कॉल्ड एज अ मेटा डेटा। अब आपको उतना डीप में नहीं जाना है, बिकॉज वी आर कंप्यूटर इंजीनियर्स, वी हैव लर्न दिस ऑल, हमने कंपाइलर्स पढ़ा है, कंपाइलर्स को डिजाइन किया है, सो वी नो दिस। तो देर इज अ स्टेटमेंट कॉल्ड एज एंड ऑफ स्ट्रिंग ईओएस। तो व्हेन इट कम्स टू द लास्ट वैल्यू, तो वैल्यूज के बाद में एक यूएस नाम की स्ट्रिंग ऑटोमेटिकली कंपाइलर लिख देता है। सो व्हेन दिस फंक्शन वुड स्कैन ईओएस, तो वो समझ जाता है कि अब ये लास्ट वैल्यू हो गई खत्म, तो ये लूप अपने आप ही रुक जाता है। तो दिस लूप वर्क्स ऑटोमेटिकली फ्रॉम द फर्स्ट वैल्यू टू द लास्ट वैल्यू, एंड यू डोंट हैव टू कीप दिस ट्रैक। आपको कुछ नहीं करना है, ना काउंटर प्लस प्लस करना है, ना माइनस माइनस, ना कोई कंडीशन चेक करना है, दिस एवरीथिंग, even though you don't require to define everything, anything. So this is what is an enhanced for loop. Now let me first of all show you the output. See the output. See, I cannot define index positions over here because we don't have counters for that. We haven't used. But likewise, what is more important is that this loop, enhanced for loop, is all are coming from the enhanced for loop, and they are coming automatically one after another. They are automatically coming one after. The first value which is printed is the first value of the inside the array, then second followed by the last, right? So basically, this is what is the purpose of using enhanced for loop. And in 95, 99% of the cases, we would always going to make a use of enhanced for loop for every collection. Whenever in the programming, I'm going to use a collection, we would going to deal with the collections. We are always going to make a use of enhanced for loop. Remember this. There would be only few programming situation, might be 1 or 2 or 3 or 4%, where we are going to make a use of conventional for loops. Otherwise, in most of other cases, right, for almost every case, we are going to make a use of enhanced for loop. So this is why this is very important. All right. So go with this program by today and try to solve this everything out of this program and try to learn this. Almost ये तो बहुत बार cover होने वाला है, इसमें बहुत repetitions चलेंगे. All right. That's all for today. I cannot take your questions now. It's almost 10 minutes. I have extended the class. We're going to meet by tomorrow morning. Thank you so much for joining. Have a good day.